One of the things that makes posters so popular to collectors, I think, is that posters are memories. Every poster has a story. The first influence on my art was Pennsylvania Dutch antiques and imagery. I grew up in Pennsylvania. In high school, I used to do a lot of sketching, doodles, and the teachers, most everybody always tried to talk me out of it because my stuff was really weird. I had gone to Penn State University, was there for 1 year, and I thought, what am I doing here? I didn't see what it was leading to. So I joined the Navy. The last year and a half in the Navy, I ended up on a ship that would come into San Francisco Harbor all the time. It was stationed on Treasure Island. We were always out to sea about 40 days, and it came back. And then when we were in port usually 2 weeks, week and a half. And other than having to be on ship for like, a couple of days during that time on duty, we'd be off. I would wander around San Francisco. I kind of fell in love with the place. When I got out of the Navy in '64, I went home, and within 6 months I was back in San Francisco. I went around all these different agencies looking for work, and I had the idea that I'd get into graphics at some point. I found out how difficult it was to get into the job market. I started going at that time to all the concerts that were happening, the explosion of electric music, and I used to go to the Fillmore Avalon every weekend. I started smoking grass. I started hanging out with all the hippies. I'd had this flash that if I didn't start doing my own artwork, I would never get into it. I moved into this apartment above Haight-Ashbury up on Frederick Street. So I used to go into the poster palace on Haight Street and look at all of Moscoso's and Kelly's and Mouse's and Wes Wilson's posters. And I knew that I just wanted to get into all this. I started drawing, and then one thing led to another, and I saw this poster at the poster palace that Moscoso had done that had a collage in it. For years, I had been tearing out pictures out of magazines. In a flash, I took everything out of the living room, so it was totally bare, and then I dumped out these 3 file boxes full of magazine pictures I'd torn out. I used to do all my collaging on the floor, kind of walking around, looking at everything. I took my work around to a few companies, and they all said, wow, very interesting, but we can't afford to publish anything. So I took my collages to show them to Moscoso. Found out his address somehow and phone number, and called him up, and he was still living in San Francisco in Potrero Hill, and he invited me over. He was showing me how he was working his studio and all this, and I took in my collages to show him. And he loved my collages. He said, wow, these are great. And I said, but I don't know what to do with them. He says, go to see Bill Gra. He's the only one really doing anything right now. So the next morning, I walked cold into Bill Graham's office. So I put all my artwork around the room, and Bill was on the phone, and he finally hung up, and he looked at some of these pieces, looked at me, went out, told Mariska to hold his calls, slammed the door, and then all he did was look at my collages for about 20 minutes. He leaned back in his chair and said, can you do lettering? And I said, sure. So we picked 12 collages. He called the printer. The printer came in. He told him to color separate my images or do whatever he had to do. And I walked out with the printer. So in a couple hours, I had 12 posters to do. And I did all the 12 posters the same lettering. So by the time I did 12 posters hand lettered, I was greased. I had it going. One of the reasons that I got so many posters to do, and I realized this very quickly, because Bill used to tell me, he'd say, oh, wow, I can read your lettering. That's really cool. Because he was so used to all this kind of hippie lettering that was made as obscure as he could get. Bill Graham had what I would call charisma. When he would get angry, he would really get angry. He would yell and scream, and I never knew anybody could swear as much as Bill. He was intense. He used to put Bill Graham Presents in San Francisco at the top of the posters, and I put Bill Graham Presents in Frisco. And he hated Frisco. He just hated it, which I didn't know. And he really bawled me out for that. I said he didn't want Frisco on his poster. One of my early posters for Bill was this tulip poster. It had tulips rising above a field and lips above it, tulips. I've had people that have come to me and said, that was on their wall for 15, 20 years, and one day they looked at it and saw that connection. Two lips, it took them that long. I did this poster that had the Grateful Dead on it that had this strange image of pills with a face kind of melting through it. And as it just turned out, that was the weekend of Altamont. This poster was for 4 nights, and 2 of the nights, the Grateful Dead didn't show up. I ended up in Bill's office talking to Bill, because he was really stressed out because the Dead weren't there, but he loved this poster. He told me he just flipped out about this pill poster, because he was very down on the current pill drug scene among all the kids. Most of the poster artists, there's a couple posters or one poster that stands out, becomes signature to them. They didn't choose it, it's just the collectors choose it. For me, it was the guy running across the mushroom in the doorway of the Cosmos in the back. That one just took off. I didn't do these images for any particular band. I usually did the collages, took them to Bill, he picked a bunch of them, and then I would apply them to individual posters. So I did posters for Bill Graham into 1971 when he suddenly closed the Fillmore. He decided to do a week of concerts with only San Francisco bands. And it had happened so fast, they didn't do a poster for the last week. Someone at the Fillmore called me and they said, we'd like you to do a poster for the last week. They were going to give one to Bill Graham as a gift. It had 17 bands on it. So it's the Fillmore poster with the most bands. It was also done, I think it's the only one that was done after the fact rather than before. And I talked him into doing a double poster so I could put all the bands on it and have room enough to put an image. Years later, I sold it for quite a bit of money, and it actually got me into the computer. That's how I got into computer graphics, is by selling the original art to the final Fillmore posters to this collector for a good amount of money. And I paid off all my debts and bought my first computer. When you're cutting and paste, you're very limited to the direction the picture's in, and the shadows and all that. You have to kind of find pictures that fit together is exactly the way you find them in a magazine. But digitally, you can change the shadow, you can flip them, you can do all kinds of things you can't do cut and paste. And the big difference from my view is that when I was doing cut and paste collages and hand-done lettering, although you can go in all kinds of directions, the more you worked and narrowed it down, your choices became more and more limited. Whereas on the computer, every step of the way, there are so many choices, so many possibilities that it's almost overwhelming. For artists like myself that are old enough, I feel like I'm in my second career. Chet Helms came to see me, wanted me to do this poster for the 30th anniversary of the Summer of Love. The Summer of Love poster was the first digital poster I did on a very slow computer. It took me a long time to do. And then a few years later, he died. They had this concert, a memorial concert for him at the Great American Music Hall, and I think they were looking for a sponsor, and Roger McNamee stepped forward and financed the concert. And he had a band at the time called Flying Other Brothers, and he played at the concert. I did a digital poster for this event, which afterwards, Roger McNamee, who was had started a new band called Moonalice, he came to visit me with his wife, Anne, And they spent an afternoon with me, and Roger asked me to do some Moonalice posters. This is my first Moonalice poster. This is an old pinup from the 30s. This lady, this airbrushed lady lying on the moon, and her name was Honey Moon. I originally did the logo right at the beginning when I started this, because my idea was I was going to put it in the moon. This was my fourth poster, and I decided she had to be looking at something, so I put the logo there. And that's when everybody said, oh, it says Moonalice, so that's how it happened. And sometimes I use it as part of the design, sometimes I just stick it in the corner like that. I put it in every single one that I've done, all 75. This is a mandala I did. It was like Three Sisters Park, so I put 3 and then I put the logo over here. When I did my poster, the first one, it was number 21 in the series, and now the one I just finished was 491 in the series. Roger's been sponsoring various shows that we've had of the posters, and the artists getting together, and it's sort of taken on an energy all its own. Every artist has their own style, and once again, we're all influencing each other, looking at each other's artwork. I had no idea when I started that I was going to do so many posters. It allows the artist to grow in his work and really experiment and try things, and sometimes it works better than others, but it allows your work to evolve and to grow, and that's wonderful. I feel very privileged that I've had 2 long experiences like that.